Alrighty, we're back in it now, talking about World War II itself, or History 173. And we're going to go through a series of these slides here. This is actually a pretty lengthy lecture. I'll try to move relatively quickly through it. But as I was mentioning before, there's tremendous interest in World War II. It's probably one of the most studied periods of U.S. history. It's one of the most studied periods of European history and world history. And the historiography on World War II is continually being written and rewritten by scholars of each generation that comes after, since World War II was completed in 1945. And there's just all sorts of different perspectives on World War II that we are able to look at the totality of the conflict from on all sorts of levels, from a military level, of course, from a political level, but a cultural and social, gendered level as well. And then we can, of course, look at some of the issues happening on the home front in addition to the war front or the battle front. One of the great things, of course, about World War II as well is that because it took place in the 20th century when technology had developed that allowed for photography and the use of visual images to be captured, we have a window into this conflict in ways that we don't have in earlier wars. There are pictures from World War I, of course, but there are many more visual images. There's moving film images. There's photography. And just like this very famous picture here of this landing unit coming on to the beach here in Normandy on D-Day, one of the most famous days of the war and one of the most famous moments in all of American history, the landing of American troops along with troops from other nations as well to fight the Germans in the north of France in June of 1944. So photography is a great way for us to get into some of this content and allow for us to document what actually happened and to be able to analyze it and to learn more information about it as scholars continue to look at and continue to work on issues related to World War II continuously. Okay, so this is D-Day. This is the American soldiers getting off of this amphibious vessel here and then attempting to get onto the beach. One of the really difficult moments of World War II, particularly this Western invasion of France and to wrest it from Nazi control. All right, so let's go back to talking about the U.S. entrance into the war. Certainly the war takes place partially in the Pacific, and there were severe problems and serious problems in the Pacific theater throughout the entirety of the war. And you might remember that the war for the United States actually begins in the Pacific theater and it ends in the Pacific theater. The European theater, the war ends in May of 1945, 3 or 4 months before the Pacific Asian theater of the war is completed once the Empire of Japan surrenders. So the attack on Pearl Harbor takes place on 7th of December 1941. Remember, Hawaii was not a state in the United States yet, had not been ratified into the United States and accepted as an actual state. It was just a territory that the United States had taken control over, as we mentioned in some of the stuff earlier, as a part of that imperial expansion stage of the United States in the 1870s and the 1880s. And so this is a really serious moment when the United States' military installations, particularly the naval ships and the military installations in and around Honolulu, Hawaii, are attacked by a series of Japanese fighter jets on the morning of Sunday, December 7th. A day that will live in infamy, as President Roosevelt said a few days later in front of the Congress when the United States declared war on Japan. All sorts of discussions. This is a photograph of several of the ships that are being bombed out here and burning in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The U.S. is going to enter into the war, and it's going to be fighting in a variety of places, like I said. And I want to talk for just a second about what happens out at the Battle of Midway Island. This is one of the most important battles. I don't think it gets a lot of coverage in sort of general mainstream U.S. World War II history. But the Midway Island is a pretty significant island, halfway pretty much from North America and the Americas and Asia. And there was really intense fighting that took place over a series of months leading into June 1942. And once the United States controlled Midway Island, once it was able to secure victory over Japanese troops in and around Midway, and the Battle of Midway Island, it was a very important stopping point for U.S. vessels, for U.S. naval vessels particularly, obviously, on the way from North America, from the United States to Asia, and to engagement with various parts of the Japanese Empire throughout all parts of the Pacific theater, Pacific realm. So this is a really huge and important battle that solidifies the U.S.'s position in the Pacific region, and it allows for greater success, and as a filling station, as a logging station, as a halfway point, a midway point between North America and Asia. And that victory goes a long way for eventual success of the U.S. military ventures and other allied military ventures in the Pacific theater throughout the last 3 years of the war. Fighting's going on all across the globe. Remember, the Allies are on one side, the U.S. is in the battle now. And the Soviet Union had come into the war eventually on the side of the Allies once Hitler and the Third Reich and the Nazis had turned against their former sort of quasi Allied pact that they had at the beginning of the war between the Soviets and the Germans, and Hitler reneges on that and basically begins to attack, turning to the east and attacking the Soviet Union and moving into eastern parts of Europe and then in parts of Russian Europe as well. And so probably the most important battle, I think, from the European theater perspective is a battle that the United States actually did not take place in, did not participate in, and that's the Battle of Stalingrad. And that's the battle, if you're at all interested in military history and you don't know very much about this battle, you should study it. There's a series of really good films that have been made about it, feature historical films, and just a really huge and important, pivotal, powerful battle when the Nazi blitzkrieg was thrown at the Russian Red Army, as it's called, the Red Army of the Soviet state, and battles all through the streets of Stalingrad. The city was named, of course, after the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, and so it had a big symbolic importance for the Soviet people to hold on to Stalingrad and to withstand the assault of the German troops in the blitzkrieg. And after a series of fighting, it was a very difficult winter. The Soviets fought hard. The German tanks froze up. Very difficult set of issues. And eventually, the Germans have to withdraw and are defeated. And it's the very first major battle of all of World War II where the Germans threw everything they had, all of the infantry, all of the tank support, the Luftwaffe air support, utilizing this, devastating form of blitzkrieg, and they are defeated and they lose. And so it has a huge impact, both in terms of the military impact on the German fighting machine, but also on the morale and on the inner circle of Nazi advisors. Hitler was furious that they lost. They had not ever, lost up to that particular point. And so there's all sorts of issues that come out of the end of sort of the beginning of the end for the Nazi regime and for the Axis powers after the defeat of the German military by the Red Army of the Soviet Union at the Battle of Stalingrad. So if you're interested in military history, like I said, I highly recommend studying that battle or learning more about it, even though the U.S. is not exactly completely involved in it. And then alongside that, there's really important things that are happening at the end of 1942 at the same time that the Battle of Stalingrad is raging across the waters. And that is the decision of the United States to develop this project that becomes known as the Manhattan Project. And what this, of course, is the project that's going to eventually develop the first levels of what becomes known as nuclear technology and nuclear weapons, and particularly the atomic bomb or the A-bomb. And so this was a super secret a project. It utilized the top American scientists. It utilized many European scientists who had immigrated from various parts of continental Europe, some British scientists as well, coming together. The leading scientific minds of the day worked on it, and it becomes a really important part of the story of World War II, and the ways that technology is central to understanding the ways that the Second World War and other wars in the 20th century get fought, and the ways that they get fought, and the eventual results of them. So, super secret. The president and only a few advisors knew of it. Even most of the people who were working on the project did not exactly know what they were working on, and did not know that they were, contributing, directly to the development of a nuclear bomb. And it was so secret, but just for instance, that there was such a small, privileged, inner circle of scientists and officials that actually knew about its development, that when the vice presidents during the time, and then the eventual vice president who's going to eventually become president and make the decision to utilize the atomic bomb, Harry Truman, after Roosevelt dies in office in 1945, and Truman becomes the new president of the United States after being vice president, he didn't even know about the existence of the Manhattan Project and the existence of the possibility of a nuclear bomb until he became president. He did not know about it at all as vice president. He was not entrusted with that information. So that gives you a sense of the secretness of it and the importance of it. And then it was a series of tests, many of them out near the Trinity site in New Mexico. The very first bomb was tested on July 16th, 1945, and that was when it became clear that at that detonation that this was going to be cataclysmic, that the scale of this new technology was going to be overwhelming. And it was really when they knew it was going to be big, but even just the scale of it surprised the officials, and it was now pushing the Allies into a different realm because they had the ability to use this weaponry, which of course they're going to do only a few months later, very, very quickly after it was first tested on a larger level. All right, so that sets us into some of the stuff that's happening in 1941 and 42. Let's stop here, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the stuff that's happening on the domestic front, what's happening on the home front, all sorts of variety of issues during the Second World War.